All right, so this is our Craigslist version of our move to top function tutorial video. So first, this right here is the file in the description panel. So I'm going to go File, make a copy. I'm going to name this Fast for my own purposes, but you name it MyTo Do List. So you can't see the tabs in this browser, but I figure if you are if you're good enough to do the Cliff's Notes version, you can get the tabs just fine. So if you can see, here are the tabs, but all right, so let's get started. First off, I'm going to create a new tab, and I'm going to go to https://developers.google.com/apps-script/reference. So once you're here in the developers reference guide, you're going to want to go to menus and user interfaces. You're going to want to go to dialogues and sidebars. You're going to want to click on custom sidebars. You want to scroll down until you find your code here. Select it, copy it, come back over here, open up a new script page, or open up your script editor. You're going to want to go to your onEdit function. You're going to want to rename that on open, just for clarity's sake. Inside this onOpen function, you're going to want to give yourself a few lines and paste it in there. You want to come here and change custom menu to MyTo Do List. You're going to want to come to the title here and change it to MyTo Do List functions. You're going to want to call show sidebar inside of your onOpen function. So I just copied that, created a new line, and pasted it in there. Go ahead and save this. Next, you're going to want to create a new HTML file. And you're going to want to name it page with a capital P. Tab over to your dialogues and sidebars guide and select minus the hello world. Select your button HTML. Paste it in there. Click up and create a new line and make a break above it. Then you want to save this. And then what you want to do is click on page. Instead of value close, you want it to say move to top. And then instead of host.close, you want it to say run.move to top, even though we haven't created that function yet. And go ahead and save that. Now I'm going to make my script bigger so that it's easier for you to see. All right, now let's go to our code here and let's start making our move to top function. I'm going to give myself some white space. Function move to top. First thing you have to do is create the variable SS for spreadsheet. So you go spreadsheet app.getActiveSpreadsheet. Then you create the variable sheet and set it equal to ss.getSheetByName, and then for the name you type in sheet 1 with a capital S because that's what our sheet is named. Next, you want to create the variable range by going sheet.getRange, and then it doesn't matter which one you select, just select everything inside. Give it 2 double quotes and type A2 through A11 because that is our to-do list range. Next, you want to create the variable range row and set it equal to range.getRow. Next, you want to create the variable range last and set it equal to range.getLastRow. Next, you want to create the variable range call, excuse me. You want to set that equal to range.getColumn. Next, you want to create the variable cell and set that equal to sheet.getActiveRange. Next, you want to create the variable cell row and set that equal to cell.getRow. That gets the top row. Then you want to create the variable cell last, and you want to set that equal to cell.getLastRow. You also want to create the variable cell column or cell call by typing cell.getColumn. Sorry. Next, you want to create the variable range vals and set that equal to range.getValues. You also want to create the variable range lines, setting that equal to range.getFontLines. Oops. I have to type that one in. You also want to create the variable range bolds and set that equal to range.getFontWeights. You also want to create the variable range vals length and set that equal to range vals.length. Next, you want to create a for loop to get the splice index. So you want to say for variable I equals 0. Oops. While I is less than range vals length, semicolon, I increments upwards. And then, oops, I just arrowed all the way to the top and I didn't want to do that. So give yourself a new line within your for loop and type variable instance equals range vals I 0 semicolon. Then give yourself an if statement that says if instance equals null, then break. Type logger.log and let's log I to see what that is. You're going to have to give this permissions. So you want to save it, and then you want to select move to top, run the function. It'll ask you for authorization. You want to click accept. So then you want to go to view logs in the view menu, or better yet, do command return. So as you can see, it gives us the index of 5. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So then we want to create a variable splice index and set that equal to I. Let's get rid of this logger. Now we want to create a variable called range info array, which is an array of arrays. Oops. An array of arrays, and those arrays are first range vals, second range lines, and third range bolds. Next, what we want to do is create an if statement that says if the top row in our selected range is greater than or equal to the top row in our to-dos list, and I didn't do this in the first video, but it's probably important. We want to do cell last. The last row is less than or equal to the last row in the range, and our cell column equals our range column. If this statement is true, sorry, I just arrowed up again. If this statement is true, we want to create a variable called changes array and make it an empty array. Next, we want to create a for loop that will loop one by one through our range info array. So we want to do variable j equals 0. We want to do while j is less than range info array dot length, and j increments upward while that for loop happens. We want to create the variable array spec and set that equal to range info array j. And we want to splice array spec and we want to splice it at the splice index. And how many do we want to splice it? We want to splice it cell last minus cell, oh no we don't. We want to splice it range vals length minus splice index plus 1. I think I'll be making a video soon that explains where that plus 1 comes from, but for now let's keep going. So we also want to create, now is the part in the code where we create our separate function to get called inside of here. We're going to, let's just put in what our function is going to be called. It's going to be called top function, and that's how you'll call it. So let's create that function. Let's go, sorry, this scroll is very finicky. Let's go function. Let's call top function. Inside of here, we want to create a variable called array and make a dummy array that is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Next, we want to create a dummy variable called index that will be 2. in this, that will be 0, 1, 2. It will be C. So we also want to create a variable how many, and we want to set that equal to 2 as well. So that means it will be C and D. So then we want to do array.splice, press return, and then what we want to do is save this here. And let's run our move to top functions. And since top function is called, it will activate this. But nothing's going to happen unless we log it, right? So let's log array. And we'll save it by clicking run, and it will run. And then we go to logger, and we've got A, B, E, F, G. And that happens 3 times because top function is called within a for loop that runs 3 times. So next we want to turn this guy into a variable, and we'll call it array splice. So then let's also log array splice. So now we'll have 2 logs per iteration. So now we've got the array after the splice and what gets spliced out. So what we need to do, I apologize. What we need to do now is create a variable called array back, which is the final array we'll be sending back. And what we need to do to that is we need to do array splice dot concat and then array. So let's log our array back. Let's see what we have here. This is our array back, CD, AB, EFG, which is exactly what we want. So now let's start replacing these variables, these dummy variables, with inputs into this function. So array instead of this guy, we'll comment that out. And then here for top function, what do we want to send it? We want to send it array spec, which is this range info array J. All right, so let's save our code and run and log this, and let's see what we get. We get eat, breakfast, homework, run, shower. So eat, breakfast, homework, run, shower. See, the reason for that is 0, 1, 2, and then there are 2 of them. So, but we want to actually send index and how many. So what do we want the index to be? We want it to be our cell row, which would be the top row of our selection. So let's put that in here. Let me make sure I'm doing this right here. But cell row isn't just enough because the range doesn't start on 0. It starts on 2. So we need to do cell row minus range row. So then we also need to put range row in here. So now, let's not log it. Let's not worry about it. So what about how many? Well, we're going to need cell last minus cell row plus 1. So we need to also include the variable cell last in here. So these first 3 here, we can just copy and put into our top function here that where is it? Just like that, right? So now we're sending this top function all of the parameters that it needs to make this happen. So instead of running it and logging it again, let's do this instead. Let's put all of this function called inside of a variable, and we'll call it from function. And then inside of here, let's log from function. All right, Now let's get rid of these logs so we don't get confused. And we return some information back from our little function here. It would be enough just to send it our array, but we have some other information that we want to use later in our function. So we want to send it array back, first of all. Then we also want to send it the range row, because that's going to be the row that we want selected in the end, since we're moving these to the top. And then we want how many, because we want to select the same number as were selected in the beginning. If that doesn't make sense, then that's okay. So now what we want to do is run our code and see what we get. So we get run, shower, eat, breakfast, homework 2. So what cell is selected? We got run, shower, eat, breakfast, homework. And then what are these? These are the lines and bolds. So let's make one bold here and one underlined. And then, so shower is selected, right? So let's log this again. See what we get. Look, underline is first. So that's exactly what we want. Shower, eat, breakfast, run. Okay. This is the Cliffs Notes version. Ryan, let's hurry this up. Okay, so we created this empty array called changes array. So let's go changes array dot push. Inside of our for loop here, we do changes array dot push, and then we want to push the first item returned here, array back. So we want to go from function, which is this variable here, obviously, from function 0. So that's going to put all of our values back in. The other things returned we're going to use later. So let's save this, and that's enough for our for loop. So this is the bracket for our if statement. This one is for our for loop, so we want to go just outside of our for loop here. And now we want to start changing our actual range. So the first thing we want to do is we want to clear the content in there from what's originally there. The next thing we want to do is we want to put the new values in. So we do range.offset, and then for row offset, it's going to be 0 because we don't want to change the row that this ends up on. Same for column. And then what about this number of rows? Well, we're going to be putting from function 0 in there. So from function 0. And then we want to do set values. Now what do we want to set the values to? Well, we want to set it to changes array 0, because those are the values. Changes array 1 are the lines. So instead of typing all of this again, let's turn it into a variable. So we'll call the variable offset, and then we'll create it here, offset. Did you see how I did that? Pretty slick. Next we want to do offset dot set font lines to changes array 1. Then we want to do offset dot set font weights to changes array 2. The last thing we're going to need to do in this code here is we're going to need to create the variable destination select, and then we need to go to sheet, get range, and then, for the row, what do we want? We want this here, range row. So that is from function 1. From function 1. And then we want our column to be range call, right? It will never be anything different than range call. So that's what it is. And then the last variable, it didn't show it here, but it's also there, is we've got the row, the column, the number of rows, and you can also do the number of columns if you want, all separated by commas. We only want the number of rows, and for that we're going to do from function to. And then we need to set our active selection to that. So in our sheet, we want to do sheet.set active selection. And then we want to put dest select in there. So now our code is finished. So I'm saving it. I'm tabbing over to my to-do list. I'm going to refresh this. It's not, there we go. So I'm refreshing this and it will show up with our new menu here. It might ask me for permissions or something, but I'm not sure. Nope, it won't. So we've got our menu, which says show sidebar. That's great. And now we have this move to top here. So let's select some cells and click move to top and see if we get what we're looking for. Whoops, it didn't do what we wanted it to do. It didn't put the values back in, which means that we did something wrong in this part of our code. So what could it be? As you probably have noticed, I stopped and looked at it for a while, and that's where this logger came from. And I figured out what I did wrong. It was a mistake. This here from function, that's not going to return something that this can use. This right here needs to be an integer, and from function 0 is an array. And I don't know why that would be in there anyway. What we need to do is we need to put from function 0 dot length. Oops. Okay, so I saved it, and now let's put in some more values here. Whoa. I'm not sure why those disappeared. Sometimes I don't know. So let's move one of these underlined ones and let's see what happens now. There we go. So we got what we wanted, and it all works just great.